to coast.
It gives me great pleasure to welcome our friend, founder of Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project, our friend Scotty Reid. Hey, Scotty, how are you?
Greetings to you, Tanya. I'm feeling much better. I know I've been reading a lot of people been affected by these changes in the weather, and I had the flu, and other people saying they had it. So I'm doing great today.
That's good. That's good. The weather has been crazy. I don't know if you all got the large pinball hail down there last week, but I just could not believe it.
No, we just got some rain, but no. But thank you for inviting me to talk about this very important topic, but I must say off the top, I'm also one of the co-producers and co-hosts of New Abolitionist Radio, which
that's right. I'm sorry, I left that out.
Oh, that's no problem. I'll remind people, because the work that I feel like we do is very important. We have 5 years of podcast archives that any legal organization, any civic organization could use as evidence to open up investigations for many different violations of federal law, but we point out that really what's going on here is a continuation of slavery.
You're absolutely right. And you turned me on to something I wasn't aware of, the documentary 13.
Yes, by Ava DuVernay, which was nominated for an Oscar. I think she was robbed. I think the film was robbed. Y'all was talking about fake news, but that White Helmet so-called documentary was a fake documentary, according to many independent outlets that I read. And so, but that's the film about the white helmets in Syria rescuing people that won the Oscar for Best Documentary. But still, I appreciate Miss DuVernay's effort. She brought the 13th to a lot of people's attention.
Oh yeah, and I would recommend everybody to watch it, really. And once, I don't know if it's out, that I would like to give away some copies of it. I mean, it's just that good. I mean,
what's the subject? Guess what, Tanya, and everybody who's in the listening audience, that film was produced by Netflix. Netflix just gave permission to everyone to have a public screening.
Okay, good.
Excellent.
Then I need to definitely, find somebody that has a venue that we can do that, because I just think everybody ought to watch it. It's just that good to me.
I think the White Helmets documentary winning had everything to do with backlash and resistance to the whole no Muslims allowed into the country, that kind of thing. That definitely boded heavy for its victory, I guess. I know nothing ashamedly about the 13th, but I keep hearing about it.
Oh yeah, you got to watch it. Definitely got to watch it. Scotty, we were getting ready to talk about Jeff Sessions, and we ran out of time, and the things that he is doing with regards to, he rolled back the reduction of using private prisons, 1. 2, they are going to do stronger enforcement with regards to marijuana use, and even in states that is legalized. And we were, putting everything together, and I know you are definitely well informed with regards to how the prison system is running in this country.
First thing, for those who have never heard me speak on this issue, I consider myself to be an objective journalist. I am not a partisan guy when it comes to politics. When I report on the politicians or the parties involved in modern-day slavery and human trafficking that other people call mass incarceration, private prisons, I'm going to just give you the facts. No emotion. The facts are the facts. We can't argue. And the main problem is that too many Democrats support private prisons, although Republicans are more likely to support it. And we're seeing that now. At least the Obama administration and the Democratic Party came around to seeing the immoral and unethical ideal of people being able to invest in companies that solely exist to warehouse bodies, mostly bodies of non-white people, particularly black people, and how immoral that is, and just coming to the realization that this is actually slavery. That's what slavery was about, right? holding human beings, and each human being represents a certain amount of capital. We live in a capitalist country, and we cannot deny the links between capitalism and slavery. Just read some of the writings of Thomas Jefferson on the matter. So at least the Democrats came around to that due to the efforts of Bernie Sanders and Keith Ellison, who was mentioned earlier, and the progressive wing. At least they came to that, but they did it too late. And let me explain that. He did it in the Obama administration, did it in the last couple of months of his administration when he issued this order, or the Justice Department, with Loretta Lynch running it, issued the order that they were going to phase out. Because doing to a study, and they didn't even cite ethical reasons like this is slavery. They said it's not saving us any money, and they're not any safer than federal prisons, so we're going to phase out the contract. So that immediately made their stops drop. This was done during the election, months before the election. People were paying attention, just that they almost went out of business. They almost went out of business because of the tremendous loss in their stocks. Now, imagine if President Obama and Eric Holder had done that towards the end of his first administration, or if he said, well, I don't think this would be a good time, let me get re-election, did it within the first few months of his second term, then no legislation would have had to been passed at all, because the stock market, the nature of the stock market, would have killed private prisons. So,
until it had a reason to resurface.
It had a reason to resurface. Well, the reason it's never went away. That's what we're saying. It never went away. So, attitudes, and people been talking, and politicians been saying, we're more progressive on this issue. We shouldn't be locking up people. These are addicts. And even the Republicans are trying to act like they're being more compassionate in their drug war fight, talking about allocating money for addicts. Well, we feel like if anybody's involved in a nonviolent drug crime, if you really want to help them, putting them in prison and sticking them with felony slave status, which will hurt them further down the road in employment, it's not helping anyone. This is a health issue. This isn't a criminal one.
Scotty, let me introduce the panel who's here. Dr. West, Van, Vivian, and Brother Omar.
Hi, Scotty. How you doing?
Hey, Scotty. What's that?
You're hitting on some really good points here, Scotty. I appreciate the sort of exposure as to the history and the involvement of the Democratic Party, but I think it's also important to look at the fact that as much as they have evolved, and I include myself because I was there in the 90s when crack cocaine was being treated, addiction was being treated as a crime rather than as a substance abuse issue or as a mental health issue. I think you're looking at an administration that has all these narratives with these wide tones that say we're going to be tough on crime, we're going to send the feds to Chicago, but have left out the important issue, and that is that they have defunded mental health. They've defunded mental health. They've defunded substance abuse. The Democratic Party is not perfect, but we will be on the right side of history when it comes to these issues of mental health support. And I think that we've got to keep pushing it to the ground. The fact is, Virginia, we had a senator here, a state senator, whose son was killed because there was a lack of bed. Availability in terms of beds. So we're talking about the relationship between mental health and violence in our communities. It's not a black issue, but when it was affecting our communities, we were criminalized for it. So what are we going to do? We have to continue to push for more money for mental health and not let this administration hijack the narrative. What's going on in Chicago has a lot to do with mental health issues and a lot to do with substance abuse and a lot to do with letting drugs on the street.
I think it's more of unemployment.
Well, that too. Labor is a big part of it. Unemployment. It's so many variables.
I'm an abolitionist, and the root cause of this is slavery.
Absolutely.
Okay.
White supremacy.
The root cause is slavery. So rather than, and not saying people shouldn't advocate for more money for mental health or substance abuse problems for those who want help, but this is also a matter of freedom and liberty.
It is.
States have voted. A majority of people say cannabis should be legal. People shouldn't be locked up for using cannabis. And now the Republicans, particularly in this administration, want to talk about states' rights when you're talking about the transgender bathroom issue. But when it comes to cannabis, they want to have a heavy hand.
Because it affects who? Because it affects
Brother Omar. Brother Omar?
Yes. What do you think is the alternative to the private-run prisons for housing the overflow of inmates that we have in different states?
By decriminalizing drugs. Grown people, just like the alcohol prohibition didn't work, and all the crime that it spurred when you try to keep people from having a beer or having a glass of wine in the criminal gangs, it's the same thing.
Okay, but how does that address the mental health issues that Sister was just speaking about?
The money that you're not spending on enslaving people, then you direct that money towards mental health and substance abuse. I would direct people to Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which is former judges, former cops. Neil Franklin, y'all probably seen him. He's been like on mainstream media, MSNBC, particularly Baltimore when they were covering the Freddie Gray thing. He is the executive director. You can find them at LEAP, that's LEAP.cc. I'm knowledgeable, but for the sake of time, I would direct people to these former judges, guards, and cops on that issue of legalization.
Well, let me say this. You all talk about mental health. Why not spend money and attention on education and jobs? 45 signed an executive order to create a crime and reduction task force. I think a lot of what happens with, persons going to jail, like they say, what is it? Cradle to the pipeline. What is that saying?
In prisons.
Yeah.
But Scotty's point, I think, is right on. Is that we don't need to have somebody come tell us something that we already know.
True.
And the fact is that if you want to free up space in the prisons, you address this non-issue, this drug issue that they've been running since for 20 years, that have ruined families. All these things. All of us, you say, let's decriminalize it. Let's treat it as a medical issue, and the monies that you save can be redirected.
Yeah, but the thing is, they are not just going after persons with drug issues. They're going after folks with guns, and we know that for us, we are targets. And, as far as racial profiling, and one of the things that, with this private prison, it's a business. No question about that. And they are going to fill it up by any means necessary. And chances are it's going to be us. Because what the prison system is, populated with two.
Right.
It's the drug laws. It's the drug
laws. Drug laws represent the black codes of the 1800s. I believe slavery was I know slavery was never abolished according to the supreme law of this so-called corporation, USA, that the 13th Amendment says that involuntary servitude and slavery shall be abolished except as punishment for crime.
There's
that.
Exactly. That's right. That's what it reads. You're right.
So following the Civil War, that is when we saw the black codes, and then the first private prisons in the 1800s. It was the federal government that opened up the first one, and it still operates one called Unicor. Many people don't know this, okay? Right. And so the drug war is just another form of the black code.
Well, my thing is this. Jeff Sessions said something. He said there is a constant concern about gun violence in Chicago. And
illegal drugs, if we know history, we know the history of Chicago during Al Capone days because of prohibition, right? Mm-hmm. So you're making all of that tax-free money. Of course, and we're dealing with immoral people anyway, and so that is why we see that violence. And I think there is also a Mexican cartel, drug cartel, operating in Mexico, and they're part of that violence. All of that isn't, as the media says, black on black crime. Those are also Mexican gangs who are empowered by people's choices when they become adults, or whether or not they use this substance or that substance, being put in prison.
Well, I still say it has to be more than decriminalizing drugs. I think that still money needs to be poured into education and the creation of jobs.
If you decriminalize drugs and then begin to tax it in some process,
Right.
The monies that are going to be generated from that, on top of what you save on the other side, will provide
That's what the
plenty
states have been
Right.
Trump administration. That's what Colorado, Washington, Oregon, and others. But Colorado is the best one to use because they're the one who's legalized it for recreational and medicinal the longest.
Well,
and they've seen a drop in crime, They've seen drops in crime, revenue increases that are by law in that state mandated a portion to go to education. So
then why is 45 talking about tighter law enforcement on marijuana in states where it is legal?
It is legal.
Because
Where it's legal. I'm trying to understand. That's why I'm confused.
There's a federal law.
Jeff Sessions, you got to understand the history of Jeff Sessions and his role in the drug war. He's been in there a long time, and he's one of them old dinosaurs from the Reagan era when it really started to ramp up the so-called drug war. And then, again, we talk about things the media doesn't report, and then sometimes there will be one or two what we call mainstream outlet that will report a story, like Fox News reported that U.S. troops in Afghanistan are guarding the farmers' poppy fields, and the policy is based on the fact this is the only way these farmers can raise money. That's where the heroin epidemic is stemming from. It's from the poppy production and heroin production.
The heroin epidemic has been allowed to grow, or should I say, stems from the overprescription of opioid painkillers, and that ain't no coincidence.
That's part of it. But I think that you should go back.
Where are drugs coming from? Like we were asking in the 90s.
We're talking about the source.
Where drugs coming from?
Contras.
All this coke on the street, and Gary Webb answered that question for us, didn't?
Yeah, without a doubt.
And we know what happened to him.
Same thing going on now, people. They never change what they do when it continues to work until the people become enlightened.
Scotty, we got to take a break. Can you hold on?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, today's Jazz Break is Freddie. Scotty, thank you for staying with us. I know you have information as to the statistics because
it's Women's Month, if you will allow me. Today, the first day of Women's History Month, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Isn't that correct? Okay, so I'm going to hit you off.
I know it's Ash Wednesday, that much I can do for sure.
The media likes to focus a lot on just the black male, but it's more than just the black male that's being impacted. Although he's the most targeted, by no measure is he alone in his suffering in modern-day slavery and human trafficking. So here's some statistics that I just put out today in a podcast recognizing women's history, and the black poet, feminist, and civil rights activist Audre Lorde. And she said, "I am not free while any woman is unfree, even when her shackles are different from my own." So, according to the ACLU, 1 million women are behind bars or under the control of the criminal and justice system, and women are the fastest growing segment of the incarcerated population, increasing at nearly double the rate of men since 1985. Wow. Overwhelmingly, the women are women of color, particularly black women. Black women represent 30% of all incarcerated women in the United States, although they represent only 13% of the female population generally. Among female state prisoners, 2/3 are mothers of minor children. So those are some statistics that I like to put out to women and invite them to come to the Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March on August 19th in Washington, D.C., and claim their place in this new abolitionist movement.
That is truly disturbing. Very disturbing. Wow. And go ahead, Fib, you have something?
No, I appreciate the statistics, Scotty, because I didn't realize that women of color represented 36% of the industrial prison complex population. That is quite disturbing. While at the same time, I understand, and I don't have the exact numbers, that women of color represent the fastest growing segment of college-educated women.
Right.
So it is good news on the other end, while understanding that we need to look at a very critical segment of our population who is being deconstructed to prevent them from benefiting from the very education that will actually help them rise above that. So it's quite disturbing. And I think, going back to Tanya's point, education and what kind of education is really the key. But also deconstructing the prison industrial complex is a big piece as well. So thanks for sharing that.
Let me ask you this, Scotty. Do you have statistics as to what type of crimes, these women...
The vast majority of all crimes are nonviolent crimes. But
AKA drug related.
The last statistics I heard was from Ron Paul, and people generally accept that. But about 76, maybe 75% of all people that are in modern day slavery and human trafficking are in there for nonviolent drug crimes. So, whether they were selling because there was no job, they hustling in the streets, whether they became addicted, whatever, they grew up in the atmosphere that encourages that. And let's not ignore the mainstream media's role in it. Shout out to Clear the Airways Project in Chicago, Brother Kwabena Rasuli, who is fighting with the McDonald's and other corporations who sponsor murder music on urban radio targeting black people. And it's just ridiculous.
I agree.
So, there's just so many elements to this. So that's education right there that we need to be informed on, not just reading and writing, but we need to be informed and educated about how this system has targeted us so we can quit falling for the same traps.
And the thing is, now we are targeting even more because reading between the lines of what Jeff Sessions is saying, this is, to me, just like they set up, did a executive order, shipping the immigrants back. This is our executive order. This, in my opinion, this is what I am reading between the lines in this whole thing. You all disagree with that?
No. I'm sorry. Say the.
What I'm saying is, when we talk about Jeff Sessions and not reducing, really revising what President Obama put in place, reducing the prison use. The fact of the matter is this: by using more, they're going to fill those prisons with somebody, and chances are it's going to be with us, whether it's women or men. That's my point, and to me, that's a target on our backs. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, no, I absolutely agree with you, Tanya.
So we need to be very vigilant about this whole thing. Right. And my thing is this: the media is not going to tell us that, until the prisons are filled.
No, they're investors.
Right. That's the disturbing part about this whole thing.
Well, let me take this a step further in terms of what you and Scotty were saying. I personally am of the school of thought that our communities of black and brown people have too much government in them. In other words, if you go on the west, and let's just take Henrico County, Western Henrico County, if you go and you look at communities on that side of town and you compare it with the eastern side, what you will see is that there are more there are more law enforcement present. You will find that there are more people in agencies who are intrusive on families of color. So what I'm saying is we need to take a radical step. Why is government always in the presence, whether it be in the form of social services, whether it be in the form of education, whether it be in the form of police officers in school? Why is there so much government presence in people of color? So when we talk about deconstructing, as Dr. West said, we need to deconstruct it all. You can deconstruct. Really? Let's make sure that the deconstruction applies to black and brown people. When it comes to having the right to protect yourself,
well, my question would be deconstructed. How would that affect us as people of color?
Well, what I'm saying,
that's the question I would be asking first.
And types of deconstruction is what I'm saying. There is too much government presence in our communities.
Scotty?
I live in a predominantly white community, a rural area, and I've been reading in the local paper how they've been targeting heroin dealers. And, of course, most of these people are white, and they're suffering terribly here from addiction as well. So I hate to say that, there's a silver lining in anybody suffering, but perhaps now they feel the pain of black people and hear our cries from the 1990s and even before that, about this over-policing. Some people call it a police state. White people in general would not tolerate this.
Absolutely. And
they just really wouldn't.
And in white communities, it's not tolerated.
Sessions and Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani, isn't he in that administration? They all support stop and frisk, and they bring him back.
But only in certain neighborhoods. Well, we don't have stop and frisk in Western Henrico County.
Let me go to the phones right quick. Maurice, how are you, friend?
To you and your esteemed panel.
Thank you.
Great discussion today, and I guess first of all, I'll start off with always thanking Scotty for what he brings to the table, and it was a question about the woman, and I'll just say this, not with any pride, but I actually had to serve some time in a federal camp in West Virginia in 2007, 9.5 months for a white-collar crime. And, I was fortunate. I had to support my church and community and family and everything, and have been able to just recoup a lot of things in life and been blessed because of that. But I'll say this as far as one thing that I noticed there, because there was a women's secure facility there, and then there was a men's maximum security. Mm-hmm. And one thing in talking with some of the people who ran the facility there was most of the women, because of the change in the laws back then, were there because if they were with or in any way connected to men that were involved in drugs or anything like that, they went just as hard as the men did, which we learned that from Kimber Smith. But that was one of the situations there that brought that on, and just along with the discussion that's going on, because we know that we have these crooked systems that are being bent even more against us, like you all are saying. We have to, in the meantime, advise our kids and some of the older ones who still kind of refuse or want to walk that line, that you've got to not put yourself in a position to even be railroaded by these crooked systems.
Mm-hmm.
But also, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, we're listening.
But I just said know your rights. I think, Tanya, you had a show, y'all talked about that, knowing your rights as well. Because you could be a quote-unquote upstanding citizen, and let's not forget, again, 5 years of podcasts documenting cops planting drugs on innocent people.
Mm-hmm. Or guns.
Right.
When you get pulled over.
Not saying anything against that, Scott, I definitely agree with you on that. But I'm just saying, we have to do the best we can in our own power to avoid that. But like you said, it could happen to me, you, anybody that's walking clean and running that. So, we have to rely on, for me, I'll say to anyone, we have to rely on our faith from that standpoint. But, just wanted to share with that. And I'm in Western Henrico County, so I understand what you're saying about that. But what I do is I get involved, and I work the polls and things like that. I'm fortunate to get all that restored and just be out of these.
And Maurice, let me piggyback on that. When you do that, it makes a world of difference. When you get involved in your community, and like you said, working the polls or working in a food kitchen or whatever the case may be, community cleanup, it makes a world of difference. I mean, you're viewed differently.
Yes, and that was the last thing I was saying, just our presence being out there. So I just thank you all for what you can continuing to do. And 5 days a week might not be bad, but I'm going on that.
Okay, see what you started, Dr. West?
I'm telling you, we need it. We need it.
Thank you, Maurice. I appreciate you sharing in your comments. Thank you, friend. Appreciate it. Scotty, you want to get the last word before we go to break?
Yes, I would just like to invite him and everyone in that community that cares about this issue to turn out again on August the 19th in Washington, D.C. for the Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March. This will be families. This will be former victims of this system. It's a lot of people coming together to put this together. So just Google or use your favorite search engine, Millions for Prisoners Human Rights March. Y'all in Virginia, y'all, just a train ride or a couple of hours from D.C. So we hope that y'all be there.
We would do that. And Scotty, tell everybody where to listen to your show and, get more information, your website.
Yes, I do a podcast called BTR News. You can find it on blacktalkradionetwork.com. But my most important work, I feel, is participating in New Abolitionist Radio that comes on every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. We've been running 5 years straight. So that's also broadcast on blacktalkradionetwork.com. Thank you all.
Thank you. We appreciate you being with us and giving us all this valuable information. Thank you so much, friend.